All right. A lot of people here. Well, we're here today to celebrate the life of probably one of the most beautiful people I've ever met. One of my best friends in the entire world. And we met here. We met here on this very campus. Went to Loretta Hall together, special classes. And I don't know, I'll never forget Brad, I'll never forget the McNultys. When I met Brad, we were like peas and carrots. I mean, we hit it off and we hit the ground running and we did it. And he took me home to his family. And Jerry and Jackie, you guys are beautiful. And you guys took me in like I was one of your own kids. And I don't know, just some of the times, like, I'll never forget you giving us Taco Bell coupons. A lot of Taco Bell. Yeah. And, I don't know, Brad loved his cars, and we used to race to school and race everywhere. And I don't know, probably the greatest thing I ever learned from Brad is, you know, don't have any fear. And live your life, and if you want to try something, don't ever be afraid to try. And, you know, I think if he were here with all of us still, he'd say that to all of you. Don't be afraid of anything. And if you want to do it, just try it. You know, if you fail, get back up and try it again. But one of the most beautiful people I ever met, and I love him, I love your family, I love all you guys. And I don't know. Thank you.
It's always tough to follow cat daddy and something, you know. You know, as I've said before, I do want to start this off saying thank you to everybody here. Thank you to everybody over the last 3-4 months. Through all the highs and lows, you guys have been there with us through it all. And without everyone here in this room today and others that aren't here, me and my family, we probably wouldn't be as good a shape as we are today. So, just to get started, I wanted to say thank you. I'm Brad's youngest brother, Patrick, and I wanted to take a few minutes to say a few words regarding my brother's life. Brad was brought into this world June 19th, 1983, and he left us September 7th, 2021. During these 38 years, Brad lived a legendary life. Growing up, Brad was always the creative one, the loving one. His interest in music and art started at a very young age. Whether it was him playing the drums in band or attending concerts with his friends, his passion with music and art, he loved making model cars and listening to Blues Travelers on repeat. As the years passed, Brad continued to love his music and his art, but a new love came into his life. He turned his days of making model cars into customizing his own car. He loved that Acura, and I'm not sure why. You could hear that thing a mile down the road with that ridiculous exhaust. Don't forget about those ridiculous subwoofers blaring those various types of rap music. At this point in Brad's life, he was at Cathedral High School. He met a great group of friends he kept for the rest of his life. This was also the time he started torturing his youngest brother as a way to kill time. I couldn't tell you how many times he'd take me in a box and threw me down the stairs. And no, John, I never wanted to do that. Even when he was bullying his little brother, he still showed me how much he loved me. He would always go out of his way to make sure I was doing okay. Let me play his PlayStation, just hanging out with him when we both had some free time. Brad continued to love his passions in life. He never let them fade away. As he grew up, he would eventually have a beautiful daughter. Brad was the best and most loving dad to Adelaide. I've always been so proud of how great of a father he was. Brad's life wasn't perfect. No one's is. Brad was a fighter and overcame more challenges than most. After being stuck in a house fire, he fought for his life and eventually pulled through. I'm so thankful we got those 15 bonus years of Brad being here on earth. Shortly after the fire, we lost our brother. Brad loved Steven so much. They were best friends, and Brad had missed him since the day he left us. I can't imagine what those two are getting into now. I know their reunion together was beautiful. After Steven passed, Brad always made sure to be in my life. He wanted me to have an older brother that would be there no matter what. Brad and I have so many great memories together. My favorites are the annual trips to Penrod and Orange, our brother's lunch on Christmas days at the Chinese restaurants, and of course the infamous golf cart accident. Sorry. Brad hated that story. The story, but telling it brings a smile on my face. I'll hold on to those memories for the rest of my life. Brad, I promise Chris and I will take care of everyone down here. Make sure that you and Stephen watch over us from up there. I love you. Now let us join Father in the celebration of Brad's life.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. My name is Kristen McClellan, and I am the oldest of the 4 Jerry and Jackie McNulty children. And on behalf of all of us today, thank you for celebrating the life of my brother, Bradley Patrick McNulty. I started off with the Serenity Prayer because it's what the 4 McNulty children were taught from the time we were born. That any time you needed to recenter yourself, you would say the Serenity Prayer. And our parents modeled it. So from the time we were really little and being rambunctious, you'd see Mom out of the corner of her eye cross herself and say, God, grant me that serenity. Or when we were being bad in the van listening to inappropriate music, Mom and Dad would look at each other, God, grant me the serenity. But to those hard times, when people we love were diagnosed with cancer or Alzheimer's, or we were praying for their souls to ascend to heaven, to accept the things I cannot change. To those times in our lives when we struggled with our grades or struggled in relationships, to those really, really hard times when we dealt with anxiety, depression, and addiction, the courage to change the things I can. And as we watch Brad fight for his life not once, but twice, the wisdom to know the difference. Brad was born on June 19, 1983. It was Father's Day that year, and his dad told Brad every day of his life, Brad was the best Father's Day gift my dad had ever received. As a child, Brad was the cutest little toddler you ever did see, with bleach blonde hair and tight ringlets all over his head, with a big, bright, shining, mischievous smile. As a grade school kid, his favorite things were playing outside and being with his friends and family, so much so that Mom got call after call during lunch about how Brad needed to focus more on academics than he did his friends. His teenage years, like all of our teenage years, were a complete struggle, where he struggled to identify with who he was. So there were years when he had tight bald fades and only listened to Eazy-E and Too Short. Other years when he let his hair grow long and he would only listen to The Dead or Fish. But even in those years, even though they were a struggle, it's when Brad first began to develop roots outside of our family. Strong, deep roots with friends that he met here in this building. Friends that would support him until the day he died. In Brad's young adult life, he continued to lay down more and more roots that grew deeper and deeper as he discovered his hidden talents. Many hidden talents. He was an artist. He could do anything from painting, paper mache, sculpture, and jewelry making. He was amazing. And he continued to grow those roots, so he stood taller and he stood stronger. And we were forever grateful because 2 storms blew through our family in his young adult life that threatened to not only uproot him, but uproot every single one of the McNultys. The first one was in January of 2006. I was on my way to work that morning when my dad called. And he said, Sis, where are you? And I said, I'm almost downtown. And he said, okay, I need you to do me a favor and go to Wishart real quick. Calm as calm could be, because our dad is our calm in every single storm. So I get to Wishart, and he's like, listen, keep me on the phone. I saw Brad's house on fire this morning on the news. They've taken 3 John Does to Wishart. I need you to see if they've identified those boys. So I went in and they hadn't. So they took me to this back room where they were working on all three of them. And from the profile of the second boy covered in soot, I knew it was my brother. So I yelled at him and I said, "Brad, it's Kristen, I'm here. Mom and Dad are on our way." And he turned and his eyes got really, really big and bright. See, Brad never spoke with his words. He was quiet. He didn't like people to know about him. He didn't like to have opinions that he spoke, but through his eyes, you could always read him. And I knew what he said to me. "Chill out, you overreact about everything." That was number one. Number two, quit worrying about me. I'm gonna be just fine. Make sure Mom and Dad, Stephen and Patrick, and you and Jason are all okay. So as the lady was pulling me out of that room, I looked back though, and I saw through all the soot on his face, his tears running down the side of his face. And I knew that Brad was scared to death, but he would never let us know it. See, that was my brother. He cared so much for other people, he always wanted to ignore what was going on in his own life. We got him better. We prayed through multiple comas and in and off the vents. We prayed so hard that we actually received an intercession from Theodore Guerin herself. If you ever get the chance to hear the story, it's one that will change your life, and my mom and dad are great at telling it. So we celebrated big that year at our favorite holiday, which was St. Patrick's Day. We celebrated that Brad survived, his roots were intact, and that all of us survived, all roots intact. But we had no idea it would be the last time we celebrated together. Because 9 days later, the worst storm hit our family when God took Stephen back home to heaven. We couldn't breathe. Our branches were gone. Our leaves had fallen off. We couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep, and we could not get along with each other. So my dad called us all in again, always our rock, always our calm. And he explained about grief, that it has no definition. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. About starting over, a new normal, where the purpose of our lives would be to lead out Stephen's legacy forever. And we all listened. But Brad couldn't. Brad never ever understood why God chose Stephen over him. So Brad went to a deep, dark place, didn't rely on his roots like we all did, and really struggled to understand the purpose of his life because he survived and Stephen didn't. But as always, we wrapped around him. We helped him with his roots, and as Patrick said, Brad was a fighter. He fought hard, he came back, and at the end of his adult life, his roots were so strong, he was so bright, so full of color. He got back together with his girlfriend, they were married, they had a beautiful daughter, and they got to live out Brad's purpose. I'd like today to tell you a whole bunch about Brad, how he was just this wonderful man that loved like no other, and that's why his love was so good. I would like to tell you how he would call my kids out of the blue or send them a gift that I thought was absolutely inappropriate. But he loved in a way that can't be described. He was amazing, but he always deflected attention and praise. So see how I just snuck some praise in about him, just so he doesn't get too mad at me. But here's what I know he would want all of you to know. And from the lessons we learned with watching him fight hard for his life over the last several months. One, there is no such thing as failure. Failure is just life moving your own life in another direction. Don't focus on your mistakes. Focus on how you defied them. For all the kids out there and young adults especially, your parents are hard, right? But what I think Brad would want you to know from the way I saw how he interacted with my mom and dad, especially my mom, over the last 11 weeks, is that when we're raising our children, it's not just you that are growing up, it's the parents too. Again, everybody makes mistakes. I can't tell you what it will be like the day that you hold your child in your arms for the first time. It's indescribable. The love they have for you is more than anything you can ever imagine. But to watch them give their babies back to Jesus, is indescribable. The purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. Live your purpose. Brad, we will love you forever, and as Dad has always taught us, we will live your legacy forever.
On behalf of Cathedral High School, please know Jackie and Jerry and the siblings and nephews and niece and other relatives that our prayers are with you, our support and our care. And we thank you for the faith that you have shown through all of this. The Celtic cross has a circle around it where the two beams cross each other. And originally, the circle was a symbol of the sun and light in pre-Christian belief in Ireland, and perhaps it came from the Druids. St. Patrick, or perhaps someone else, developed the Celtic cross to say that the real light is Christ. That the circle can also symbolize that even something as ugly and as death dealing as crucifixion and torture and darkness, nothing, no one, not Jesus, not Brad, stands outside the circle of life and light, no matter how dark it gets. We may think that we've been abandoned, but we do not stand outside the light. We may think we are lost, but we cannot stand outside the circle of the power and love of God, the God who seeks to find us when we're lost. We cannot stand outside the power of God to bring life out of death. And that's what we believe, and that's why we are doing this with Eucharist. The circle helps us to understand those words of Paul in the second reading, that no thing, nothing, no person, no evil can separate us from the love of God. Now, certainly it doesn't always feel that way. Sometimes it feels perhaps almost the opposite, which is why we probably need to periodically pick up the scripture and read it, why we need to come to Eucharist to be reminded, why we keep crucifixes in our churches and on our altars, and sometimes in our homes and around our necks. So the Apostle Peter says, keep your eye on the cross. Keep your eyes on that Celtic cross. And also keep your eyes on one another, which is a way of saying care for one another, because that is one of the ways in which God keeps us inside the light, inside the circle. We cannot go through death and loss alone, without family, without friends. And Jerry and Jackie, the McNultys, have done this so well, keeping everybody inside the circle of life in the midst of death. You've done that well, you've done that for a long time, and you will continue to do it well. And you keep each other within that circle. Not only do you do that by the care that you have for each other, but you do that through your faith. And at least in my short time of being involved with this family, that faith is very strong. That faith is something that you generously share with each other, perhaps starting with that serenity prayer. A faith that enabled you to get through the death of Stephen and now Brad. You have faith in so much. Faith certainly in our Catholic tradition, but faith in our Irish Catholic tradition. A faith that believes in angels. And I don't know whether you've ever read or heard Jerry's piece on angels around the time of the dedication of the cross. Angels, you have faith in Cathedral High School and its legacy. You have faith that believes in the beauty of gardens. A faith that is filled with gratitude for friends and those who become your angels. Another way in which we keep each other in the circle of light is through our shared tears, our shared grief and sorrow. And again, I'm reminded of the line, a box full of rain will ease the pain and see us through. We celebrate a life today, but we do so with tears in our eyes and sorrow in our hearts. And I'm reminded of another song by Mumford and Son, in which he writes, "But we're young, open flowers in a windy fields of this war-torn world. Hold on to what you believe in the light, when the darkness has robbed you of all your sight." We keep one another in the circle of life by our care, our faith, our love. But Christ himself helps us to do that. Christ keeps us within the circle of life. In some Celtic prayers, Christ is referred to as the encircler. Encircler. It's a little hard to even figure that word out. Encircler. It's hard to track that word down even on the internet. But it does come from Celtic prayers. Here's a prayer that refers to Christ as the encircler. Christ, my shield, my encircler, my Christ, for each day, each night, for each dark, each light, my shield, my circler, my Christ, my Christ. Which ought to remind us of the St. Patrick prayer. I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's eye to look before me, God's ear to hear me, God's wisdom, God's word to speak for me, God's hand to guide me, God's way to lie before me. Christ the encircler, who has kind of drawn a circle of warmth around this family, around these friends. So think of this circle as really being the light of Christ, continued 2,000 years later. Brad, I think, was a gentle soul. I did not know Brad. I learned a little bit from Kristen's talk. I like the mischievous Brad. I like the quiet Brad, who sometimes, again, just couldn't quite get it all out. But the people around him helped him. Brad, who, the artist who made jewelry, and there's a piece of jewelry coming up. It's not a piece of jewelry, it's a sculpture of a tree that's coming up with the offertory gifts. The man who loved photography and painting and cooking, a family member, a friend, a brother, a father, a husband, and a friend, and someone who loved, but probably in pretty quiet ways, is how I understand that. And Kristen, you just did a beautiful job of talking about Brad's suffering. You know, not everybody is willing to admit that other side. We are a mixture, huh? All human beings are a mixture. We're no different than Brad. There's no reason to be judgmental about how this all came about. because each of us has our own struggles. Each of us is a mixture of dark and light. Each of us is a mixture of joy and pain, suffering, and those really beautiful moments in life. And you really characterize that extraordinarily well, and in a very honest way. And we certainly know about that suffering, the fire, the death of his brother Stephen, his personal challenges, and the disease that caused him to be in the hospital and that led slowly to his death and added such a great loss for your family. It was way too early of a death, just as Stephen's. And yet, just as God is eternal, so deep down in every one of us, deep down in Brad, is something eternal. We often might call that the soul, but spirit, or however you want to talk about it, there's something eternal in all of us, because love is eternal. Love does not come to an end, as Paul says in Corinthians. Love lives on. Love will hold us together. Love will see us through. We come from God's love. Brad came from God's love. And we go back to God's love. But God's love is eternal and enduring. Brad's dying, in the words of the first reading, was thought to be an affliction, and his going forth from us utter destruction. But he is at peace today. Oh, and then there is a hymn called